This episode of Mini Tech Scroll is brought to you by Blackbird, a venture capital firm investing in Aussie and Kiwi startups from the very beginning. Blackbird invests in all kinds of technology. So if you have a big idea but need to raise investment to turn it into reality, learn more and connect with the Blackbird team through the link in our show notes. Hey everyone, and welcome to Mini Scroll, the daily internet culture podcast bringing you the biggest stories from social media, the creator economy, and the digital space every Monday through Thursday and sometimes Fridays. My name is Annabelle and I am your Wednesday Mini Tech Scroll host and also the deputy editor of the youth digital media brand Centennial World. Welcome back to Mini Tech Scroll for another week. This is our first week in the new office. This is my first time recording in the new office. So if I feel a little bit off, I think it's just because I'm getting used to the space. I know it looks the same for you guys, but it's just a much bigger room, a different setup. So I feel like I'm still getting used to everything, but hopefully the quality is good and the lighting is good. We've literally just mounted the lighting on the wall basically. So I hope it looks good because this is the first time we've had it set up this way. But aside from that, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe and star rate us on Spotify specifically. We also have a Buy Me a Coffee link in our description if you want to check that out. But let's just get right into the content for today. The first thing we need to talk about is how we have officially had the first AI artist debut on a radio Billboard chart. So I have literally seen this all over my For You page, but if you haven't, an AI-generated artist named Xania Monet is, quote, the first AI-powered artist to debut on an airplay chart this week, as per Billboard. Xania is an artist who was created by a Mississippi-based poet, Talisha Nikki Jones, and she reportedly uses an AI music tool called Suno to create the music for Xania. Xania appears as a black woman, and I'll insert some videos on the screen for those of you who are watching, and she seemingly produces contemporary R&B style music. I've seen a lot of people comparing her to my girl Beyonce, and I can definitely hear some influence there, but obviously no one can top the queen. Now, Xania has charted on several Billboard charts up until this point, but why she is currently making the news is that she has earned enough radio airplay to debut on the Billboard radio chart. The song in question is one called How Was I Supposed to Know, and that has actually also made the rounds on TikTok. But before this, she debuted on the Billboard charts for, quote, hot gospel songs with Let Go, which climbed to number 3 on the chart, and hot R&B songs with How Was I Supposed to Know, which hit number 20 at its peak. I also should add here that Xania is by no means the first AI artist to chart on Billboard, but she is definitely the first one to kind of break out of the digital space and have radio appeal. And after she initially started getting buzz, there was an alleged bidding war to sign her with offers up in the millions, which is crazy to think about when it is an AI generated persona who wouldn't be able to tour maybe in the same way as a human artist. And that is honestly where artists make so much of their money. But it was reported in the end that Hollywood Media ultimately signed her to a multi-million-dollar deal. There is obviously a lot to say about this story, and I do think we can make quite a few comparisons to Tilly Norwood, who was the AI actress that recently made waves in the industry that I reported on a couple weeks ago. But while I was preparing this story, I did scroll through Xania's TikTok content. At the time of recording, she is sitting at around 450k followers, with some of her most popular videos getting millions and millions of views. And the comment sections of her videos are a little bit sus, I won't lie. You have a lot of people who are hyping her up, which I think could be bots. They kind of have the vibe of bot-generated comments. But then you also have others questioning whether she is a real person or not. Once again, showing how it is getting harder and harder to differentiate between AI content and human content online. I also saw an interesting take by a creator named Zowie. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not 100% sure, but I have referenced her here before. She is a tech content creator and also a VC. But in her video talking about Xania, she posed a couple of interesting questions that I also think are important to raise. First, she asked who actually gets paid when the artist is AI? Is it the platform that is helping Talisha Jones produce the music, or is it Talisha herself? And then she also wondered who we can actually qualify as the artist. I think these two questions will only be answered as this kind of first wave of AI artists and performers come through. So I do think that is just something that the industry will eventually have to sort out.
So everyone says that they don't want AI music, but one of the newest artists climbing the Billboard charts right now isn't even human. There are a lot of questions that come up to mind for me, like who actually gets paid here? Is it Suno or Talisha Jones or the artist that her model was trained on? And who is the actual artist here? Is it Talisha Jones or Suno the software?
On top of this, she also added that down the line, she could see the introduction of certain categories in award shows that focus on AI generated music, which I could also see being the case unless the industry really is trying to separate itself from endorsing this kind of music. Something that I wanted to add to this conversation, though, is what this kind of AI generated artist means for representation. On the one hand, I do think you could make the argument that these artists create more diversity in the industry through diversity of opportunity, like maybe someone is a brilliant songwriter or poet, but they can't actually sing. I don't know if that is a valid argument, but I think we can't ignore that. I do think it's also worth asking whether these types of artists are taking opportunities away from real people who can represent marginalized groups and minorities. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this, especially around the questions of compensation that the TikToker raised. If Talisha isn't the one being paid, it does feel like the industry is just finding a new way to profit off the image and sound of Black R&B artists without fair recognition or reward. I'm not sure where I sit on this as a whole yet. I feel like I really have to think about it and see how the industry and consumers react to these kind of artists, but I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts. I actually have another piece of music industry cross AI news that dropped this week. This is a little bit of a tangent, but Universal Music is teaming up with AI music platform Udio after settling a lawsuit with them. So the lawsuit was a copyright issue, which is something that we have become accustomed to with AI generation at this point. Universal basically hoped to prove how various AI-generated songs on Udio resembled or mimicked Universal-owned music. As part of the agreement, they will now be teaming up on a new streaming platform, which is being billed as part Spotify, part creator-driven, part social network, according to the Rolling Stone. Per the publication quote, the idea, execs for both companies tell Rolling Stone, is a service that, with artist permission, will allow listeners to use AI to revamp well-known songs, utilize singers' actual voices for new creations, and mash up multiple artist styles, among other innovations. On top of this, on this new platform, no AI creations can be downloaded or posted outside the platform, and it seems that users will only be allowed to work with songs and creators who have opted in. It kind of seems like Universal is trying to find a more permanent solution to all the copyright issues that are coming up with AI, because there clearly seems to be a demand among audiences to make AI generated music. Whether that is a desire to consume it, I'm not so sure. I think it's a little bit different. But obviously, when consumers and users create AI music and post it elsewhere, it can be a form of stealing and will likely hurt many people in the industry, like producers and writers, down the line. So it does kind of seem like Universal is trying to strike a balance between what is happening online and what consumers are already doing and protecting artists. I'm not too sure if this will be successful, but I am intrigued to see what actually happens with this platform. Okay, the next story I have for you guys today is all about this report that has recently come out about newsfluencers. The report was released by Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, which is a UK-based research institute and think tank based at the University of Oxford. Last week, they published a report all about newsfluencers. The whole thing is like 80 pages, so there is a lot in there. I would definitely recommend reading it, though. I found it super interesting. But before we get into some of the key findings, I did just want to note the research methodology, because after doing my honors year at university, I realized how important that is. So most of the data came from the Reuters Institute Digital News Report surveys through 2024 and 2025. The researchers also used open text response boxes to collect the data, and it was across 24 countries through Europe, the Americas, Africa, and the Asia Pacific. I thought, though, I would go through some of the more useful findings or interesting findings in the report. And the first thing that I found to be quite useful is how the researchers differentiated between different types of news creators, and they broke it down into 4 categories. The first was commentary, which is like the Joe Rogans of the world. These creators are often polarizing and maybe a little bit controversial, given that they are unconstrained by the rules around traditional media. And also, rage bait, this type of content is just what gets engagement online at the moment, as we all know. The next type of creator, though, was news and investigation creators. So these are creators or citizen journalists who maybe break news, but also create meticulously researched content. The next category was explanation-driven creators, and these are people who give context and explain the news quite simply and getting down to the basics, which is often catering to younger audiences. And lastly, the report notes the specialists, who are creators or journalists who specialize in a certain topic. And the report actually uses Taylor Lorenz here as an example. Aside from these newsfluencers / news creators, the report also notes the existence of news adjacent creators who, quote, rarely talk about news and politics, but the size of their audience, which is often larger than those in the first section, and the trust and authenticity that they have built up can still have a powerful impact on political debates. And an example of this is someone like Alex Cooper. Anyway, I thought that was quite a useful way to qualify different types of news creators, because I do think they often get lumped together as one type of creator when there definitely is a lot of different niches within this corner of the internet. Anyway, let's get into some of the key findings, which is probably the most interesting part of the report. The researchers found that there are significant differences between countries as far as the impact of news creators. I was surprised to learn that some of the places where news creators are the most influential are places like Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. And by contrast, Japan, the UK, and the Netherlands were some of the places where these creators are the least influential or impactful. Off the back of this, another finding was that creator consumption is generally national or local in nature, meaning users tend to consume domestic creators. This definitely doesn't surprise me. I feel like I would see a lot of Australian news creators compared to someone abroad, because why is it relevant to them? But the report also does note a significant overlap in English-speaking countries, which I can definitely see in terms of how many creators the United States would export to places like Australia. But perhaps the most egregious finding and potentially upsetting finding is that news creators and personalities tend to be men. I fear it's not really a surprise, but it is always confronting to see it in the data. So the researchers found that 85% of the top 15 news content creators are men across the 24 countries. This oversaturation of men is especially pervasive in political commentary, which also doesn't surprise me. Since our audience is mostly based in the US and Australia, I thought I would share that in Australia, 13 out of the top 15 news creators that were listed were men, compared to 12 out of 15 in the United States. And also, a lot of the most frequently mentioned creators actually crossed over. It seemed that the Philippines actually had the lowest proportion of men, with only 7 out of 15 being mentioned. I will say that this isn't the first piece of research that has come out that has made this conclusion. I remember data by the Pew Research Center last year found that online news influencers are predominantly men and more likely to be conservative. In their study, the center found that 62% were men, with a slightly larger share identifying as Republican, conservative, or pro-Donald Trump than as Democratic, liberal, or pro-Kamala Harris. Obviously, this was conducted during the 2024 presidential election there. Interestingly, though, TikTok stood out with a smaller gender gap and more balanced political representation, where it was the only platform where left-leaning creators outnumbered their right-wing counterparts. But yes, I would definitely recommend, if you're interested, checking out the Pew Research data as well as the report that was just released. I have obviously highlighted the key findings, but it also includes a country-by-country comparison, which I thought was really interesting and telling, but I am also a nerd. The reason why I wanted to report on this, though, was especially in light of the Teen Vogue story that Lauren covered yesterday, where the politics team was eliminated and Black journalists were laid off. We often talk about social media as a space that's opened up opportunities for storytelling and information sharing, and there is definitely truth to that. Like, there are so many citizen journalists and digital creators online that are platforming stories that matter to minorities and marginalized communities that would not be covered otherwise. But at the top, we still see the same patterns as traditional media. It's still mostly men who are delivering the news and decide what's important in more mainstream capacities. Of course, part of this is the platform's fault. Platforms rarely do enough to limit misogyny and harassment towards women, ultimately silencing many women's voices as they seek to kind of protect themselves. This is something we see especially on YouTube, which the report also happens to find as the most important platform for news creators. So this only further stifles women in these spaces. But anyway, I guess the moral of the story is to keep platforming women and gender diverse folk and just more diverse news creators so we can ensure inclusivity, diversity, representation in coverage and perspectives in the news, because that is honestly what is very important. And finally, the last quick story I actually wanted to mention today is the conversation going around at the moment about AI browsers and how they are actually a security risk. I've seen numerous articles published over the past week from publications like The Verge, NBC News, and Futurism talking about the risks with AI browsers like ChatGPT's Atlas or Microsoft's Copilot mode. As reported by The Verge, quote, "In the past few weeks alone, researchers have uncovered vulnerabilities in Atlas, allowing attackers to take advantage of ChatGPT's memory to inject malicious code, grant themselves access privileges, or deploy malware. Flaws discovered in Comet could allow attackers to hijack the browser's AI with hidden instructions." Some of these threats are unique to AI browsers compared to standard browsers due to the memory functions like The Verge mentioned. So that is when the AI basically learns from everything a user might do. But also there is just a general threat, I guess, when rolling out new technology. When developers are working on products, there will be certain weaknesses that they may not even realize that only come to the fore through hacking, which is unfortunate, but I fear that is the reality. Despite these various security risks, Robert Hart for The Verge contends that AI is where the worst threats are brewing. Quote, "The biggest challenge comes with AI agents that act on behalf of the user. Like humans, they're capable of visiting suspect websites, clicking on dodgy links, and inputting sensitive information into places sensitive information shouldn't go. But unlike humans, they lack the learned common sense that helps keep us safe online." So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens and how the AI browsers develop. I'm curious if any of you have opted to use AI browsers, if this is something you've come across. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments. Well, that is everything from Mini Tech Scroll today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I won't lie, I did feel a little bit weird in this room, but I think we'll get used to it. Lauren will speak to you guys tomorrow, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.